Bionicle. Now that I have your attention, subscribe to the channel.
Hey there, kids, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, and that you are having a great day. And in today's video, we are returning to the past to go back to the future as we follow up on yesterday's video about the liquidity of modern sets versus the demand of tomorrow and all the stuff that entails. You see, there was a YouTube post from a YouTube user, a comment on the last video by Gold Mock King, and I'm just going to read it in its entirety so you guys know what this video is about. And it says, "For all I know, you are entirely right, but I wouldn't totally dismiss the idea that in the future, the current sets that are coming out now are not going to appreciate as much as people think they will." Saying that because of what happened in the sports card collecting hobby in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Sports cards collectors hoarded so much sealed product during that time, and the companies printed so much that pretty much all sealed sports card product from that era are almost completely worthless. So I would not be totally surprised if the same thing happened to the TCGs of today. And you know what? You got a really good point there. And I think that point alone is good enough for a video. You see, it's absolutely true that in the early 90s, there was a bit of a glut, a bit of an overwhelming amount of sports card availability, which did contribute in a pretty major way to the perceived crash of the hobby at that time. I shouldn't even say perceived crash. There was definitely a crash. And it's absolutely true that when supply meets demand in the worst possible way, there are lasting ramifications. Ramifications that can echo long into the future. In fact, even now, 30 years later, there's a lot of product from the 90s that have never really recovered. A good example, of course, being Beanie Babies, where once upon a time they were highly sought after collector's items, and nowadays most people just let them collect dust in their basement. But you know what? An interesting counter argument to this post, and part of why I so firmly believe the point I was making in the previous video, that is, that there will still be demand in the future, is because we've actually already seen this happen in the world of trading card games. Specifically, we've seen something like what Gold Mocking is talking about occur already in the 1990s. And no, not in the world of sports cards, in the world of Magic the Gathering. You see, for the first 2 years of Magic's history, stores could not get enough Magic the Gathering product. They would place their orders with distribution or Wizards of the Coast directly, trying to get as many boxes as they could, and they rarely, if ever, got enough to supply the players who just wanted to get a hold of this crazy, kooky new card game. That all changed in the very tail end of 1994 with one of the most infamous sets in Magic's history. Today we're talking about Fallen Empires. One of my favorite sets, but for completely unrelated reasons to its financial status. Fallen Empires, which is a name I think most Magic the Gathering fans are familiar with, but maybe if you're a Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh fan, you wouldn't be completely aware of the story. You see, when Fallen Empires released, people were starting to get comfortable with the current state of the Magic market at the time. The availability of Magic, the power level of Magic, the overall themes, mechanics, etc. So along comes Fallen Empires, and fallen indeed, because this bad boy is still remembered today by some as one of the worst sets of all time. And there's a few reasons for that. One, yes, mechanics. But two, was the financial situation regarding the set as it hit release, as it hit stores. Because, as I said, stores were trying to get as much Magic the Gathering product as they could. They would order 200 boxes and get 20. They would order 1,000 boxes and get 100. That wasn't the case with Fallen Empires. Stores were finding, as they ordered as many Fallen Empires boxes as they could before the set came out, because they didn't know what was in the set. They just ordered it knowing it was new Magic product, and all prior Magic product was so hard to get a hold of. They ordered so much, and with Fallen Empires, supply caught up to demand. And supply was rampant. Stores got exactly what they ordered. A lot of it. Now, that wouldn't have been a problem if Fallen Empires turned out to be a wildly in-demand set that everybody just couldn't get enough of. But here's part 2 of the problem. Fallen Empires was not that great a set in terms of mechanics and power. There's a lot of people who, at the time, did not really appreciate what Fallen Empires brought to the table. There weren't any great game-breaking cards, no meta-defining new pieces for any of the decks. It was kind of a flounder of a set upon release. Now, this led to a problem. That problem was one of perception. You see, when Fallen Empires released, people just kind of looked at it, and as the weeks and months ticked by and more of it just kind of sat on store shelves, unsold, unwanted, unloved, it became known as the first major failure in Magic the Gathering history. And that name has followed it all the way through to today. Now, is Fallen Empires a completely worthless product? No. In fact, today it is worth definitely more than MSRP. $500 a box, I think, is the last I saw one sell for. Which, yeah, for a 30-year-old box of cards is not that great, but it's not nothing. And that's the kind of the point of Gold Mocking's post. You see, when the bull market for Pokemon shifts, for Magic shifts again to what we had before in the last 2 years, I would say last 2 or 3 years, if that shift coincides with a set or 2 sets or even 3 sets for either game that are just very poorly received in general because they just don't bring enough to the table, they're weak sets, the alt arts suck, the mechanics are trash, etc., whatever it is. Those particular sets could get hit with that perception of being absolutely awful, absolute dog water. They will sit unsold on store shelves for years, and it will take them forever to appreciate at all in some sort of value. It doesn't matter what it is. Now the train's here. But that doesn't mean that those sets or that the product around them is going to be worthless. And that's, I think, the important distinction to make between things like sports cards collapsing and Magic or Pokemon products. Sports cards, for the most part, I understand that there's other things you can do for it, but for the most part, sports cards are just a thing you can either hold on to as sealed product or crack to try and complete a full set or get a specific card you're looking for, right? That's not the case with Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Flesh and Blood, etc. Pokemon is a game. Magic is a game. Flesh and Blood is a game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Exists. There's more to it than just the collectible aspect of it, which is part of why I think, in my opinion, there will still be some demand for these products as the years turn by. There's still demand for Fallen Empires. It's why it's $500 a box. It's not a lot of demand. It wouldn't be $500 if there was a lot of demand. But there's still some demand out there for Fallen Empires, hence its appreciation and value over time. Gold Mocking is absolutely correct, as is anybody else who thinks that a failed set of today might have a hard time appreciating in value in the future, especially when compared to contemporaries like Destined Rivals, Prismatic Evolutions, 151, Final Fantasy. If a Magic set comes out, what's next for Magic the Gathering? Avatar? Spider-Man? Something like that? If the Avatar The Last Airbender set comes out and is an absolute dog wash set, yeah, it might not appreciate as well compared to Final Fantasy, but it's still going to appreciate well. In a hypothetical situation where, the market shifts completely, my words. If the market shifts completely to the absolute bearish, everyone's super negative, nobody wants anything, stuff drops below MSRP like that, and this coincides with an absolute trash set, that trash set is going to have a very hard time gaining any value for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And that will be true, okay? But that doesn't mean that everything else around it is going to underperform. You know, no one's looking at the... I don't know. Let's just use Destined Rivals because it's on my mind right now. No one's looking at Destined Rivals and hating it. Destined Rivals, I think, is going to appreciate very well in the future, regardless of the turns that the market takes, regardless of how many people are hoarding it, regardless of how many people are just absolutely sitting on it, hoping for their big payoff. The reason is, Destined Rival will still have intrinsic demand as a game piece and as a collectible. That's two aspects already that make it desirable right there, but besides just the sealed product nature. The same might not necessarily be true of a product like Fallen Empires or hypothetical future Fallen Empires for Magic or Pokemon. So yeah, is there a chance that a set will come out that will just not appreciate very well? Yeah. In fact, I think it would be foolish to think that it could not happen. I think there's going to be failure sets in several card games for the foreseeable future. Couldn't possibly predict when those sets will happen because I'm not someone who has behind the scenes peeks at the power levels of every given set that's coming out for every given card game, but you know, it's gonna happen probably. Could have sworn I heard something just now. But those other sets, the ones that are in demand right now, the desired right now, those are going to still have desirability in the future. A lot of the success of a set is determined by perception of that set. And a lot of the long-lasting perception is formed at release, or close enough to release. If a set like Final Fantasy is seen as highly successful, highly in demand, extremely powerful and popular as it comes out, then 5 years from then, that set will be seen as extremely powerful, extremely popular, very successful. I can look back throughout Magic and Pokemon's history and pinpoint several sets throughout the life of those card games that people loved, and they continue to love because they have nostalgic attachment to the initial release window of that set. That nostalgia, that memory, that adoration does have an impact on how people perceive the game now versus when it came out 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And that's really all I'm trying to say here, so I don't talk in circles. Yes, there will be a time, there will be failure sets in the future. Sets that have a difficult time appreciating in comparison to their contemporaries, regardless of the card game. But that doesn't mean that you should be shy about sitting on products of today, especially successful products like Destined Rivals, Final Fantasy. I'm trying to think of a Yu-Gi-Oh set that's good right now. I'm struggling. I'm sorry, guys. Anyway, that's all I got for you kids today. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below. If you think I'm right, leave a comment down below if you think I'm wrong, because either way, I get engagement, and if it's a good enough comment, it gets a whole video dedicated to it. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.